The world-honored one, along with many of the disciples, started toward the east and then later turned south and returned to Vaishali. The retreat that year was held in a large forest on the outskirts of the palace. Hearing that his father King Shuddhodana was ill, the Buddha returned promptly to Kapilavastu to visit him. Upon entering his father's sick room, the rays that the Buddha gave off lit up the bed on which the king rested and relieved the king of his pain. The Buddha, with his disciple Ananda, stood at the bedside and with words of comfort about the king's illness, taught the Dharma. When the Buddha told him the truth of the impermanence of all that exists, the king, despite the pain, was able to realize enlightenment by virtue of the Buddha's instructions. On the evening of the seventh day the king rose from his bed and, supported by the Buddha and Ananda, deeply repented of the past unkind actions that he had inflicted on his subjects, and then he offered comforting words to Mahaprajapati. The king spoke on death, which cannot be overcome, and with the realization that he had done what had to be done in this world, he breathed his last at the ripe old age of 97. The Buddha then taught the Dharma to the disciples, to the nobles of the royal family, and to the royal servants. On the day of the funeral he placed the royal casket upon the funeral pyre and set it aflame. The sermon given by the Buddha on that day enabled many to be relieved of the suffering of this world. Now, after the royal funeral rites for his father King Shuddhodana, the Buddha stayed in the garden of Nigroda trees. It was at this time that Mahaprajapati approached the Buddha and made a request. "O world-honored one, I humbly request that I be given permission to be admitted into the Sangha." The Buddha did not give his permission. Mahaprajapati asked 3 times, and each time the Buddha did not allow her to enter the Sangha. Disappointed, she bowed to the Buddha and left his presence. Later, the Buddha left Kapilavastu, returned to Vaishali, and stayed at the Kutagara lecture hall. Mahaprajapati cut off her hair, put on a robe, and headed for Vaishali, taking along the ladies of the nobles of the Shakya clan. When they reached Vaishali, they stood at the entrance of the great forest lecture hall barefoot, covered with dust, and with tears flowing down their cheeks. Ananda, seeing this, was deeply impressed with their sincerity. He had the ladies wait outside, approached the Buddha, and made a request. "O world-honored one, Mahaprajapati and the other ladies have made a long journey, they are covered with dust and are in tears. They seek your guidance. They are now standing at the gateway of this lecture hall. Please, world-honored one, permit them to join the Sangha." To these words the Buddha answered that Ananda must not ask for permission to admit women to the Sangha. Ananda asked the Buddha a second time, and the Buddha refused again. Ananda then made his request once more. "O world-honored one, if a woman were to become a mendicant according to the rules of the Buddha's doctrine, could she, by following the way of spiritual cultivation, reach awakening?" To this question the Buddha answered that she could. "Ananda, women can achieve awakening if they become mendicants and devote themselves to the teaching." To these words of the Buddha, Ananda said, "O world-honored one, if women are such, then it is appropriate for the Buddha to permit Mahaprajapati, who is your aunt and has nurtured and raised you, and the other ladies of noble families, to enter the Buddha's Sangha." The Buddha then said to Ananda that if the women would follow the 8 observances, he would admit them, the 8 being these. Even if a nun has been a nun for over 100 years, she must show respect to a monk by bowing in reverence to him even if he was ordained just that very day. A nun must not conduct a retreat where there are no monks present. A nun must confer with the monk Sangha every half month on the date that the precepts are reviewed and must receive instructions on the precepts. After the retreat, a nun must ask both the monk Sangha and the nun Sangha to point out and present violations of the precepts. A nun who has committed a serious offense must be separated from both Sanghas for a half month. After having been trained in the 6 basic abstentions as a novice for 2 years, a nun must request ordination rites by both Sanghas. A nun must never shout at or criticize a monk at any time. A nun must never point out violations by a monk. The Buddha said, "Ananda, if Mahaprajapati is resolved to follow these 8 observances, she may be permitted to enter the Sangha." Ananda immediately told the above to the ladies. Mahaprajapati responded, "O venerable sir, just as a young woman who wishes to make herself beautiful washes her hair and carefully holds the beautiful flowers she has received high over her head, I shall respectfully receive these 8 observances all my life and never violate them." Ananda then reported to the Buddha, "O world-honored one, Mahaprajapati has accepted the 8 observances and has been accepted into the Sangha." To this the Buddha said, "If women had not become mendicants, the teachings would have long remained. The Dharma would have remained pure and true for over 1,000 years. Now that women have been admitted into the Sangha, the purity of the teachings may not continue for long, and the true Dharma will last for only 500 years. Ananda, no matter whose home it is, if the women outnumber the men, it becomes easier for bandits to break in. Again, when a rice paddy is stricken with disease, the rice will not last long. Likewise, now that women have been admitted into the Sangha, the purity of the teachings will not be preserved for long. Embankments are built around a large lake to prevent the water from overflowing, thus have I laid down the 8 observances for nuns." At this time the Princess Yashodhara and other ladies of the Shakya clan were admitted along with Mahaprajapati.